You've heard it before and you're about to hear it again. The gender equality gap is alive and well in the U.S. of A. Women today make an average of 80 cents for every dollar men make. You knew that. But here's the new part. That gap may start as early as childhood. Two new analyses show that while girls do more chores around the house than boys, when they get allowance for it, they get about half the money that boys do. About a half hour of work and nearly $14 for boys, around 45 minutes of work and just under $7 for girls. And get this, according to one of these findings, boys are also more likely to be paid for personal hygiene tasks, like brushing our teeth or taking a shower. How did I miss out on that one? So are practices like these contributing to the gender divide we see in adulthood? And what can we do about it now if these expectations are locked in early? Joining me to discuss are Tina Opie. Tina is an associate professor of management at Babson College. Nice to see you, Tina.
Nice to see you.
Colleen Ammerman is director of Harvard Business School's Gender Initiative. She's working on a book about gender and career in the 21st century. Great to meet you. And Jesse Mermell is former communications director for Governor Deval Patrick, and she's now president of the Alliance for Business Leadership. Jesse, it's great to see you. Let me start with you. I mean, there are a bunch of takeaways, at least for me and I assume for you. The obvious one is that gender discrimination begins not in the workplace with that callous boss, but with your mom and dad. Did that not surprise you?
I wish I found it surprising.
Really?
Listen, all of us are on the receiving end of bias, and we also all have bias. And I think as hard as we all try to tackle what we have inside, we've been a subject of being raised in this society. And so everyone I know who's raising little kids right now, as feminist as they might be, as progressive as they might be, are really fighting the fight internally to make sure that they aren't imparting any of those areas of bias on their children.
And they're losing that fight, let me tell you.
I was shocked by the extent of this. I was not shocked by the fundamental issue that it existed.
You study these kinds of issues for a living. Were you surprised by any of this?
No, I mean, I think I agree, right? I wish that it were, more surprising than it is.
2-to-1 allowance? I mean, 2-to-1. There's not some little tiny gap. 50% gap in the amount of time they're expected to do chores?
We still see, really, quite stark gender gaps, right, in the workplace and in terms of leadership, right? I mean, something like 20% of board seats at Fortune 500 companies are held by women, right, for instance. I mean, the gaps really are pretty large everywhere you look.
Yeah, but these are 12-year-olds. So you can make it unanimous? I was surprised. Am I the only one of the four? Well, you're the man. No surprise there.
Yeah, that's it.
No, I'm serious. Were you surprised by this?
No. And I have 2 teenagers, 1 boy and 1 girl. And I'm going to check how much we're paying them. The thing is...
You're going to do an internal audit?
I'm going to do an internal audit. The thing is, have you ever smelled a funky teenage boy? So I sort of get where the parents may be coming from, but maybe we should pay the girl for not stinking instead of paying the boy when he cleans up.
Why do you think this happens at this stage? We'll get to later in life, a little bit later in this discussion. Why do you think it happens? Is it just almost like genetic? Are we wired to do this kind of stuff?
No, I don't think it's wiring. I really think that this is a situation where, as parents, we were conditioned that girls behaved a particular way and boys behaved another way. And honestly, we're often taught that boys are not supposed to be as domestic as girls. So we expect girls to do it. When boys do it, it's sort of a surprise. It's a nice thing. It's similar to parenting if a father walks his children to school, yay! If a mother does it, there's no comment. It's expected.
Well, go ahead, Jesse. I'm sorry.
I just want to add that in addition to that conditioning, which I completely believe in, we also have public policy and workplace policies that perpetuate this. So take paid family leave just as one example. If you happen to have access to paid family leave, which is a big if, you are much more likely to take it if you are a woman. The idea that you would take it as a man for any extended period of time to care for a loved one, to take paternity leave, is seen as so strange. And so if you're a child and you're seeing what parent in the home, if you happen to be in two-sex household, what parent is home doing that domestic work, our policies that are in place perpetuate the idea that it should be women. And it's the cultural norms on top of that that I think are creating the situation we're seeing.
But you seem to be saying that it's initiated by the kid. It's being done to the kid. The kid is not the one. It's not a bottoms-up kind of thing. It's a top-down parent to child kind of thing. And even if you can explain, one of the things that didn't surprise me is that boys' chores are usually outside. They're cutting wood or whatever. Yeah. Believe me, I never came close to cutting wood. But cutting wood and girls expect to do inside stuff. But the salary allowance differential. How does one explain 2-to-1? I mean, How do you, none of you are shocked. How do you explain that?
Well, I think also what Jesse is saying is there's a pernicious kind of feedback loop, right, between home and public life. So organizations, also public policy obviously plays a role. But you think about the way that organizational cultures, right, really reinforce these kinds of norms, right, and really reinforce kind of work that women do and work that men do. I mean, it really is the case. We know from tons of research that women who quote unquote opt out of the workforce after having kids, it's actually they feel pushed out. And what happens is they start to feel like the loss of status and opportunities they feel at work aren't worth it, right? So they kind of revert to a more traditional role, and then that's what their children see. And then I think, as you're saying, that really does have an impact.
I want to get to the workplace finally after one more thing of these two studies. Is that, first of all, progress is being made, both on the financial front and on the time spent doing chores. So there's good news there.
Yeah.
The thing that is the best news, which I don't understand at all, is the one place where the amount of time spent by boys and girls is almost exactly the same is family care.
Yeah.
How do you expect that too? How do you explain that? Why is that?
It better be the case for my Kennedy and Chase. You guys better be taking care of us when we get older.
No, I'm serious.
I think that it's a conditioning. I think again, as a child, I expect to take care of my children and of my parents, and I think our children
boys
do.
And girls.
I think our children do as well. I don't know about you all.
You guys
That's been
buy
my
into
experience.
that's what the expectation of a little kid is? You don't?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think
it may differ by gender.
I think it may differ by gender, but I think part of it also is really thinking about. It's not just things are happening right when you're a kid, but then there's so much that then sort of impinges on whatever modeling you might experience at home, right? So I mean, it's not, these aren't static.
So let's get to what you've been talking about, the next stage. There's a professor quoted in this New York Times story from the University of Kentucky who does things not unlike what you do at Harvard. Chores are really practice for adult living, she says. So the problem is that it just gets generationally perpetuated. Do you buy the notion that what we see in the workplace is in great part a product of what we're now seeing, or at least understanding at home?
Sure. I mean, again, I think it's a feedback loop, right? So the organizations affect the home and vice versa, right? I mean, it's not something you can just pull apart because gender roles operate across all kind of dimensions, right? All domains of life, work and life, right? So and gender stereotypes are just really durable. I think that's what we're seeing more and more. They're really sticky.
And a little girl, I'm guessing, is getting a full sense of her lack of worth, comparatively speaking, as a kid, and a little boy is getting a full sense of his greater worth. If all this, is that not what one can take away from this?
That might be true. I think, but what I think actually, what I would want to say that I think is really important that we're seeing in research that we are doing at HBS is that women expect a lot more egalitarianism than they're getting, right? So if you think about the messages that girls are getting, from all kinds of media and probably from their progressive feminist parents, we see that, even Harvard Business School alumni who are, driven, career-oriented, ambitious, dual-career, high-earning couples, they still have these gender differences. And also what's really important is that women starting out post HBS, they're telling us that they expected a lot more sharing and a lot more egalitarianism than they actually got.
Well, let's talk about problem solving for the last couple of minutes, meaning solving this problem. And my sense always was, we've had a million discussions here. I think the two of you have been part of these in the past, about CEOs, about C-suites, about boardrooms, pathetic in Massachusetts, the great progressive Massachusetts. But if you attack the problem only in the workplace, which is where most of us have been discussing it, and we learn that it was born at home, then we're probably not going to eradicate the problem at all. Is that a ridiculous conclusion?
I'm going to push back on the idea that it was born at home. It was born of society, and home is part of society,
yes,
right? This
point.
is a much, much bigger issue. And that means that there, yes, need to be some public policy solutions to this, but more than anything, as with any ism, it requires each of us having a really hard conversation with ourselves and being willing to speak up and call things out that might feel awkward. The classic example is, why is the woman the one in the meeting being asked to get the coffee? Why is the woman the one being asked to bake the cake when it's someone's birthday? Does that probably stem back to some stereotypes people have about home behavior? Yeah, it probably does. But does that home behavior, is it rooted in a larger society issue? Yeah. And so as hard as that is, I know that isn't a big magic wand waving type of solution, but in so many cases, it is a person by person internal look and conversation.
And so I agree with what Jesse's saying. However, I do think there are some challenges to confronting this on an individual basis. And the reason I do that is because people are going to possibly talking about race, but civil rights,
Black women make 66 cents.
Yeah,
for
let's
every
not even
dollar
talk about. It's not
men,
80 cents for Black women, and it's even less for Native American women, and even less for Latino women. So, but what I want to get at is public policy absolutely plays a role, because there are some men and some women who are never going to let go of those traditional gender roles. That's fine, but in the workplace, I want to know that I'm treated equally, and I think we have to start by addressing the men, Jim. We focus a lot on the women. You know, lean in, get prepared, increase your capacity and your competency. Yet we have very qualified and competent women who are confronting men who don't think that they belong in those leadership positions.
I don't disagree with it. In fact, I agree with all that. But when you talk about public policy, I want to end with private policy.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you don't want to break the spirit of your little girl by expecting more of her, comparatively speaking, and paying her less, because you do put something in her head about worth. Even am I not right about that?
Yeah, I think that's true. But I think it's about, you know, how we measure worth, right, across all domains of life. I think, like we're all saying, and I think it's really important, you know, to understand that gender stereotypes and these kinds of gender norms don't just affect girls and women; they affect men, right? I mean, you said earlier, you know, often men don't feel comfortable taking paternity leave, even if there is a policy in place, and that's an organizational culture issue. I mean, we have such an opportunity for men, and for particularly men who are in positions of power and influence, right, to change organizational cultures to make it so that it's actually acceptable for men to be doing more at home.
Agreed completely. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Joe.
Pleasure to meet you, brother. I really appreciate being here.
I'll send you my laundry.
I already have it. It's okay.
That's creepy.
Thanks so much.